For years, when the UK has succeeded, it's often been at the expense of other countries. First, it was using its empire, and then it was attracting top talent from across Europe. Like many other nations, Poland had been no exception, but this is quickly changing. In the last 30 years, Poland's economy has grown to be 10 times bigger, more than any other country in Europe. And since they joined the European Union in 2004, their economy has grown twice as fast as the UK's, as they have gone from strength to strength, developing industries to last, whilst many UK giants continue to fade. At this current rate, Poland stands to become richer than the UK by as soon as the 2030s. And this is causing an interesting phenomenon. Every year, more and more Poles who moved to the UK for a better life in the previous decades are starting to leave the country to return to their homeland. It seems after years of continual decline, the UK has finally reached a tipping point where other countries are far more desirable than their own. You may be thinking that this doesn't sound like a problem. Typically, migrants who come to the UK tend to be lower skilled than the average population and can often act as a burden on state finances. In fact, it was proven empirically in this paper here. But Polish workers, as well as many others from Eastern and Central Europe, are a unique exception. They are often highly skilled and vital to industries ranging from healthcare to construction. As more and more leave the UK and return to Poland, it simultaneously makes Poland better off and the UK more problematic, especially in a period where the UK needs workers more than ever to build homes and infrastructure. But this is far from the only reason why Poland is profiting. Poland's sudden rise is the result of decades of careful planning, good execution, and countless years of hard work and sacrifice from Polish people to create a better future for themselves. This comes at a point when hope about the future of the UK is running thin. A new government who ran on the premise of change is struggling to get much done, and riots in the summer showed how upset people really are. It may not be long until we see British people also making the move across to Poland. So how did this start happening? And is there anything Britain can do to reverse the trend? Despite their upcoming differences, both Poland and the UK are facing one similar issue. They simply don't have enough shows and films on their Netflix library. They've got less than quite a few of their European neighbours, and unless you're viewing from Slovakia, then you could be getting more films. To fix this, you'll need the sponsor of today's video, Surfshark VPN. Out of all the subscriptions that I have, Netflix, Spotify, Amazon, the one that I use the most is Surfshark VPN, and it's also by far the cheapest. While most can cost you upwards of $15 a month, until the new year, Surfshark is just $1.99 a month, and when you split that between 7 friends and family members, it's just 28 cents per person. So for less than $1 every month, I get access to better prices on products and flights that use browser cookies to make things more expensive. I get to travel the world virtually, and I get to access sites that are blocked by my region, like Netflix from another country. To take advantage of this special holiday promo deal for just $1.99, all you need to do is visit surfshark.com/invisiblehand, and make sure to visit before the offer ends on January 1st. Just click the link in the description or in the comments. To see how Poland and the UK's fortunes changed, we first need to go back to the 1990s. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Poland faced serious financial and social challenges. After leaving the Soviet sphere in 1989, its economy and people's lives were in ruins, as they had an abrupt divorce from communism. Prices of once subsidized goods skyrocketed, inflation reached 786%, and mass unemployment followed as industries lost state support. Though these reforms caused short-term hardship, they laid the foundation for future success. The UK, on the other hand, was already seriously thriving. It had just transitioned from a manufacturing to a service-based economy, and London especially was booming. But even then, the seeds of the problems were being sown. London's financial boom came at the cost of industrial regions like the north of England and Wales, deepening regional inequality. As the UK deindustrialised, it became more reliant on foreign labour, especially Polish migrants, for service sector jobs, leaving many manufacturing gaps that Poland's economy later exploited. Even though Poland began making decent progress, Its progress went to a whole nother level in 2004. This is when they joined the European Union. At the time, it was one of the EU's poorest members and became the beneficiary of a flood of EU structural funds worth billions of euros. In some sense, this was the equivalent to the post-war reconstruction money it had missed out on because of the onset of the Cold War. Access to the EU's single market also vastly improved Poland's trading opportunities. Foreign investment surged as companies took advantage of Poland's low labour costs and growing workforce. As a result of this growth and EU membership, GDP at purchasing power parity is now 80% of the EU average, compared to just 39% in 1990. This gave more money to expand infrastructure projects, education reform, and job creation. But there was also a downside. Entry into the EU opened up freedom of movement, which allowed millions of Poles to migrate to wealthier EU countries, with the UK as a top destination. Here they began to fill key roles in construction, agriculture, and hospitality. Despite losing some of its top talent, Poland was focused on its mission of making outcomes better for everyone. Even though it was still notably poorer, they placed a heavy focus on diversifying into manufacturing and industry, creating a more balanced economy, whereas the UK continued to lean heavily on financial services and allowed its industrial sectors to wither, as they now employed fewer than 10% of the workforce in industry in 2008, whereas in Poland this figure was 30%. While finance made certain individuals in London really rich, it created a deep divide and also made the UK system incredibly vulnerable. All it needed was a disaster to strike. And that day came. The 2008 financial crisis was a turning point that exposed structural weaknesses in Britain's economy. As financial markets crashed, the UK entered a sharp recession, which hit the country hard. Debt soared, and in response, the UK government imposed austerity measures, cutting public services and investment, further weakening living standards and planting the seeds of dissatisfaction and instability that persists today. Meanwhile, Poland's less developed financial system, which was not as deeply intertwined with global markets, acted as a buffer during the crisis. Its banks had minimal exposure to toxic assets and speculative activities, shielding the economy from financial fallout. Poland also benefited from a more diverse economic base, with manufacturing and agriculture playing a larger role compared to the UK's heavy reliance on services. While the UK struggled with austerity, Poland took advantage of the EU's funds to invest in infrastructure, fueling further growth and creating jobs. This economic resilience made Poland one of the few European countries to avoid recession during the crisis, maintaining steady growth even as many European economies faltered. As the UK's recovery remained sluggish, Poland's continued expansion gained momentum, eventually attracting back workers who had once left in search of better opportunities abroad. This is where the tale of the two economies begins to come closer together, as it seemed like since 2008, Poland's economy has gone from strength to strength, while the UK has suffered. If the financial crisis revealed cracks in the UK's economy, Brexit shattered what remained. In 2016, the UK public had voted to leave the European Union in a very narrow outcome. The referendum gave people a chance to express their discontent with economic mismanagement, and they voted to leave, in part to control their borders and take back control of the country from the EU. The economic wisdom from those of the Leave campaign at the time was that this would save lots of money, which in turn could be spent on areas like Britain's health service. But what happened next has been somewhat ironic. Freedom of movement ended, introducing barriers and uncertainty for EU workers. Many Poles, who had once been essential to the UK's labour force, chose to return home, with the Polish population in the UK shrinking from 1 million in 2017 to 700,000 in 2023. Instead of producing the economic growth promised, labour shortages hit key sectors like agriculture, healthcare and logistics, putting further strain on the UK economy. Britain is now short an estimated 100,000 lorry drivers and has 200,000 unfilled hospitality positions, which has suppressed revenues by 15 to 20% since the end of lockdowns. At the same time, Poland's economy kept improving, with wages and living standards rising, offering opportunities that now matched, or in some cases even surpassed, those available in the UK. This shift, combined with Brexit, made the UK less attractive and accelerated reverse migration, just as Poland's workforce became more skilled and in demand. Reflecting this trend, Poland's employment rate stands at around 2.7%, indicating a tight labour market where there is a lot of demand for workers, with both job security and wage growth. Now, of course, this isn't all because of Brexit. Many wider macro factors are also at play here, and the UK isn't the only large Western economy to be going through an economic rough patch at the moment. But in this particular case of Poland benefiting directly from the UK's downfall, Brexit was certainly a turning point. The current crisis in Britain's health service, the NHS, perfectly illustrates the consequences of the UK's economic decline. Brexit worsened staff shortages, resulting in a shortfall of approximately 124,000 positions, with many Polish healthcare workers leaving and returning to Poland. As waiting lists have grown, the quality of care has also fallen. Only 29% of respondents were satisfied with the NHS in 2023, which is the lowest level since records began. In contrast, Poland is benefiting from steady economic growth and EU funding, expanding its public services and creating better conditions for returning migrants. To be clear, Poland is still suffering from labour shortages of its own, like many other countries in Europe, but these are being helped by a steady migration of natives back to their homeland. The change in trajectory has created a feedback loop between the two countries. As more Polish people return home and more skilled British people seek better opportunities abroad, the economic gap continues to widen, setting both nations on divergent paths. But what does this mean for the future? Can Poland really sustain this growth, and will the UK ever reverse its decline? Poland has built significant momentum, emerging as a manufacturing hub and a growing tech and engineering centre. But the question now is whether Poland can sustain this growth or face the middle income trap. This is a situation where Poland's economy has become the beneficiary of lots of investment due to its large, cheap labour force. But as its economy grows, workers will be paid more and more, gradually eroding its price competitive advantage and therefore making it less attractive to invest. Poland's economy is heavily reliant on foreign-owned companies, especially in industries like automotive manufacturing. 40% of Polish industries are owned by foreigners, and it has not yet established many major companies domestically which can provide the same employment and development opportunities as multinationals. At the moment, it looks like it could be caught in middle income status, as it's reliant on relatively cheap labour to keep up the flows of investment. It remains uncertain how Poland will sustain its momentum from this point. On the one hand, the country lacks a significant number of domestic companies, but on the other, Poland has cultivated an increasingly educated workforce, positioning itself as a hub for engineering graduates. It also ranks as one of the hardest working countries in Europe, with productivity levels far exceeding those in France, Germany, and even the United States. Economic theory would therefore suggest that over time, these factors should foster the growth of Polish-owned businesses, capable of propelling the country forward. However, this transformation has yet to fully materialise. In the UK, there isn't the same type of optimism. Stagnant wages, high inequality, and struggling public services continue to drive young talent out of the country, not just people who are foreign-born, but British skilled individuals too. This is evident in a place like the NHS, where doctors are leaving to Australia for better working conditions and an overall improved quality of life. Addressing these issues would require major investment in infrastructure, public services, and innovation. But this progress will take years, especially as the economy adjusts to post-Brexit realities, and may require even higher taxes than the current state. A new government might attempt policy reforms to attract skilled workers and rebuild the labour market, but the UK would also need to rely heavily on immigration once again to fill labour gaps, and this is a policy which is proving increasingly unpopular, as it comes with its own challenges, as the workers that Britain has been attracting tend to be lower skilled and won't make an immediate difference to the economy, potentially acting as a burden. The challenge is that new skilled migrants may no longer view the UK as attractive, with rising costs of living and fewer advantages compared to countries like Poland. As wages rise and living standards improve in Poland, British workers may one day find themselves looking to move there instead for better job opportunities, just as the Poles once did to the UK. During Germany's economic boom, British workers moved there to benefit from higher wages and job stability, and a similar shift could be happening in the UK. Continued reverse migration from Britain to Poland would symbolise a complete role reversal. As Poland continues to attract returning workers and build on its success, the question is no longer whether Poland can catch up with the UK, but whether the UK can recover in time to stay ahead. Donald Tusk's prediction that Poland's GDP per capita will surpass the UK by 2030 may be bold, but it reflects the widening economic gap between the two countries. Even if Poland doesn't overtake the UK by 2030, the shift in economic power is undeniable, with the UK struggling to retain talent and Poland growing steadily. The two nations are on divergent paths, one toward revival and one toward further decline.